Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another bonus video of Deep Thoughts. So it's almost summer here at nighttime. It's pretty good during the day. So you know me, I like to think about really interesting exercises for the brain. I also like writing film. And so sometimes, you know, when you do, it's almost like the old brainstorming sessions you might have in business. Sometimes you need to do that in story. You must throw darts in your mind and just piece some stuff together that's never been pieced together before and see what comes about. I kind of came up with this idea. I'm calling it in my mind the deep matrix. And it has to do with the idea that this is a matrix, a simulation. And then I started to think about, well, what is the anatomy of a matrix? Why do we say that? Why does it make it different? And the theory I think that most of us conceive of, especially due to the movie, but we would have probably conceived of it way before the film came out, which is why the film logically created itself the way it did, is that in the physical world that we live in now, the ethereal-based world that we believe we live in, we seem to have a tremendous amount of things that we can do. We know that the variable list is gigantor. I don't even know what kind of number I would use to try to itemize everything in our reality that could go one way or the other and thus change everything. The butterfly in Peru changing the price of tea in China. The butterfly effect. But in this world, it's all about causality. That's what physics tells us. That's what the science tells us. Equal and opposite reaction. Reaction and opposite reaction. You'll hear the sprinklers at night every once in a while. My neighbor finally fixed her sprinklers. And when they come on, the possums that were hanging out in that backyard hop their ass on the fence. It's really funny. But now the Matrix is a place where we, I think, conceive quite comfortably that anything can be done. Anything can be done. And that's what appeals to us about it. It's like Matrix the movie. Mr. Smith pushes through any being. It's like, was it Morpheus? Was it Morbius? Morpheus. Lawrence Fishburne's character. He snaps his finger in the Matrix and boom, it's a white room and all that stuff happens. You can jump across the building, bend a spoon, bend reality around the spoon. I don't think that we're the same kind of human beings that we were 30 years ago. In that, and that's not a profound statement, think about how rapidly we shrunk the world, how rapidly we evaporated and vaporized frontiers with the internet. It used to be when I was a kid, you wanted to travel the world because you hadn't actually seen anything. And you were still naive to the frequencies of Instagram, which is my life's better than yours. That was pretty subliminal to most people. And now it is right in our face. We know those algorithms because we see it all the time. And what was somehow this keeping up with the neighbors is now sort of a nauseous feeling. We don't want to be those people anymore. One, we probably feel it ourselves. Someone is living a pretty amazing moment. Now, whether or not they're getting everything out of it you would is to be determined at a future time. But if you see a photo and you're like, oh my God, I wish I lived that life right now. Someone's in Hawaii, they're in the Bahamas, or wherever you want to be, they're there, and you can't be there because you can't afford it. Maybe you can afford it, but someone in your family's sick and you can't leave. But the thing, too, is that the mysteries of the world are starting to evaporate almost entirely. I have seen, personally, pictures of every place I'd ever want to be so many times by so many people. It's kind of lost its thing. Now, there's still some places. I want to see the pyramids of Giza at some point with my own eyes. But I'm taking you through this little exercise so that we can get to the pretense of what I'm going to call, or the preface, I should say, of the deep matrix. Now, I've mentioned in a couple episodes this notion that we want to have the freedom that is in the Matrix, the movie. There are no limitations. If it can be conceived, then we'll have it. Now, to the same degree that the internet has shrunk reality for us and tempered our frontier-seeking, adventurous minds, because everything has been seen, everything's been done, so too it would be the Matrix. You turn it on, let's just say, for the first time. You jack into it. You're in some VR. You're messing around in it. You are Neo, but there are no Mr. Smiths chasing you yet. And you play in it, and you're like, oh my God, I can do anything in here. Dial up a human being. They're your boyfriend, your girlfriend. You dial up a rock band. You could be the lead singer, the guitar player, the drummer. Doesn't even matter. You don't even have to play the drums or sing. But in this Matrix, you open your mouth and the perfect note comes out. You just kind of strum around the guitar and the right thing happens. Whatever you want to be, it's at your fingertips. How fast would your world shrink? How fast would it shrink? I think it would shrink so utterly instantaneous, going from all things that are possible that are within your conception circle to being completely bored out of your mind within 15 minutes. Just like when you turn a first-person shooter on and you set it to God mode and you can't get hurt and, one bullet kills and you just talk to somebody and they die. Provided that that's what you're supposed to do, get rid of all the bad guys. Eventually, it's boring. And not only is it boring, that experience has often resulted, as I've said, in game testing, but even in my own personal travels, you never want to play the game again. And I mean, you never want to play it ever again. Something happens. Because you've tasted full infinity of what could possibly happen. And what frontier is left for the mind? What elephant graveyard is there to explore beyond? Nothing. Now, I want you to bear with me here because we're talking about a Matrix world in this episode. So whatever I'm talking about, if I mention the real world, I'm going to designate it. If I don't preface it that way, then we are talking about a Matrix world. Think about where we think we are right now. I mean, no matter what shape you think the world is, we are in a deep black nothing on a shape. And we're here. And if any of the instrumentalities that we've been able to figure out, any of the machines that we use to measure perhaps distance to other stars, other planets, potentially if these galaxy shots are real, we would be in this place that is so isolated and so far away from perhaps the edge of the machine. Or perhaps we're an entity that doesn't really exist the way we think we exist. That we are essentially characters in print in a book trying to escape the pages. And the author who wrote us Maybe he finds that funny. Maybe he just, as a scientist, goes, well, that's a noble effort, what you're trying to do there, but because of paradigm problems, because of the very nature of your existence versus where I exist versus where you exist, you're ink on a page. You don't exist until someone reads linearly phonetic words and it manifests this temporary consciousness of your existence. Could you imagine if we were just a thought in someone's mind when they read a book? And then as soon as they forget us, we disappear? I think that I have seen no evidence that we are in a matrix, necessarily. But how would we define it, right? If I'm defining it as a limitless paradigm, then this isn't that program, is it? We definitely have limitations. Those limitations define us. How tall are you? How smart are you? What color's your hair? What's your voice sound like when you speak? How do you laugh? What food do you like? Where do you live? How many of you exist at one time that you're aware of? 1, 2, more? I think there's only one of me right now, with this consciousness. Now, I believe that, quite frankly, there might be a bunch of us out there. Maybe there's only one of us, like I've said before. I think one of the most terrifying aspects that I think about when I think about things like a God, an infinite, omnipotent, all-knowing, always has been there, always will be God, is the notion of existing with no knowledge, quite frankly, of what it's like to die. Now, some people in religion believe that God came down as a man, set aside the universe and all of his responsibilities and came down as a man, and then lived about 30 plus years and died. And struggled with all kinds of, thoughts like a normal man would. Don't know. Doesn't sound plausible to me. The reasoning behind it sounds fairly interesting. But how could a God set aside his responsibilities to hold the universe together, to keep the mathematics of the universe running like a program that never, ever shuts down, has no bugs, and just runs? And then the question comes about, the chicken and the egg question, what was before God? Regardless of what you believe our reality is, we will always have, quite frankly, maybe in an afterlife as well, the gnawing question of where did all this come from? Can you imagine this fictional, and I'm just saying fictional because I'm making this up. I am making this up. That's why I'm saying fictional. But we die, or you die, I should make it personal, and you travel to the center of the universe, wherever that is, metaphorically speaking, and you are beholding God, and it feels good. It's a wonderful place. No complaints. And, you flex your wings, you relax a little bit, but eventually you go to a picnic with God somewhere. And you can ask God questions. And you say, God, is it okay if I ask you where you came from? I mean, I know that they say that you've been here the whole time, but surely there was a moment without you. And what if God says, I don't know. I've wondered that myself. Because as far as I know, I was always here. There was never anything before me. Now, let me give you a couple observations on that. If we talk about the characters in a book, where the very first line on the first page is perhaps a first-person thought of our main character, our protagonist. But you could somehow sneak into the book and say, what was there before the first page? The character might just simply say, in all honesty, well, I don't know. In terms of this reality, which is the first page to the last page, since I exist on the last page because I'm telling you the story, I've always existed. Unless there's a negative page set that goes under, the number 1 page, Roman numerals or whatever, I've always existed. I don't know anything else. But here we are, man. We're man on earth, and I just gave the analogy of the book. I know you got it. God gives you some form of that answer himself. I don't know not existing. I just know existing. And I seem to keep going. Time is only an illusion that you incur because you have memory, like me, and we have state change in the universe. Things change. It's an ecosystem. Things are birthed. Things are renewed. It goes in a big cycle. It seems to go forever. But God's just in this infinite cycle of being alive. And then we're still left while being in heaven, let's just say. We're still dealing with the anxiety of the enigma of our creation. And the only way to get over it, save being able to jump out of the book and look around the office of the writer, is to simply divorce ourselves from the question in the first place. That the question is the enigma, not the universe. Now, some people might find solace in abstracting this reality into a matrix to essentially create the turtle explanation of where the world is. The world is flat and it's on the back of a turtle. The old question, well, what is that turtle standing on? And the old lady says it's turtles all the way down. Well, if we say we're not really here in this real world, we're in a matrix, we're in a computer, and there's all this proof that it's a computer. Okay. Well, where does the computer exist? Who made the computer? Who wrote the program? And where did they come from? You find yourself right back inside the paradox. There's no solution for this question. The only solution would be to say, it's a dumb question in the first place. We simply exist. Because man is born, lives a little while, and dies, and can die so many different ways it's ridiculous. When you pop out of the human body and you go into the soul realm, the energy realm of our true existence, our pure realm, well, there's no real way to die. And so perhaps the way to deal with that paradox that is right in front of your face, once you pop out, if you can maintain that question in your mind and you care, then you've got to be born into some sort of body to forget it for a little while. And maybe hope and pray that you stay ignorant in this life and never ask the question in the first place. But what do we hope to gain by the answer in the first place? What kind of answer could be given to that question? There was nothing, and then there was something. Even to say, consciousness is the one we really want to know about. When is the first conscious life birthed into this world? Into the universe itself, God. They say, well, it was an amalgamation of forces and materials. Ethereal particles provided some sort of tangible body. And then there's this spiritual force, which is really love. And when the two work together, they ended up creating consciousness. In a physical form, in a non-physical form, whatever. And then somebody says, but where did all this stuff come from? Regardless if it exists, regardless of how inert it might be or extremely meaningful, where did it come from? For me, the concept of the deep matrix goes like this. How many layers of a matrix are there? How many layers? I mean, we're in one version for sure. But is there one above us, and then above that, and above that? The idea being, we really have a pretty simple requirement for the afterlife, don't we? You know, atheists want to disappear into nothing. Fine. Poof, you get what you asked for. With the spiritual people, they have all kinds of different types of gods. You know, some people want a bunch of virgins because they're going to rape a bunch of girls. That's awesome, right? Unreal. But most people want to go to some pearly gates and have this weird dude read a book, and then you can go to a bad place or a good place. And there's some folks like us that just say, look, I just want to meet the Creator. Have a few words, chill out, relax in the green room a little bit, get my new lines for the next script I'm going to be in, and then come back down and roll hard like Putin. So if you think about it, our requirements for the afterlife are pretty modest. Pretty damn modest. I have not heard someone sufficiently describe heaven who believes in heaven the way that they were taught in church. In fact, one of the most religious people I ever dated, I finally stopped her once and I said, well, what is heaven? Tell me. You are so sure you dislike me because we can't agree on a religious doctrine, even though you go to a church and you couldn't possibly agree with anyone there in its full form, and the woman had never read the Bible in her life, cover to cover, but so sure that she needed to find a way to be superior to me. It was really strange. But she started to try and explain it, and I think within about, and I am not exaggerating, within 20 to 30 seconds, if not 10 to 15, she said, well, it's just heaven. It's just heaven. And the weird thing was, I got the sense, I could be wrong, but I got the sense that she was willing to suffer in this world and not chase any dreams and punch out of a lot of issues that she had, because she's literally living to die to go to heaven. When maybe one of the things God wants us to do is become something. God is expending potentially, let's make God very man-made for 1 second as the helicopter approaches the show here. But let's say God is keeping you alive, and it's effort. It's obviously an infinitely small piece of his control apparatus. I say he, just for the sake of argument. But then you get to heaven, you get to meet him, and he's like, well, I made you alive, but what did you do? You waited to be back up here again. Like, you dialed out. What was the point of that? I mean, I'm not a jerk, so I didn't just yank you out of the world. I didn't just go, poof, you don't exist anymore. I waited and waited and waited for you to do something interesting with yourself, and you never did. And now you want to come up here and chill with me forever because it's just heaven? Now I got to entertain you here? Well, what makes here any better than there? You sat around and waited for something to be brought to you, I guess. You weren't participating in your own life. You didn't think out of the box one day when you were there. That's what I designed you to do, and you didn't do it. We don't have much of a definition of a heaven anywhere in any religion, anywhere. It's just this place that's a lot better than this. It's a place where you don't have any aches and pains because you don't have a body. The funny thing is, the common definition is all of our lusts that we develop in the human body, in this reality, whatever this is, we want to go there and have infinite spoils of it. I mean, could you imagine, the idea is like, I want to eat a bunch of, sweet food and never gain weight. And, some people we can't really conceive of being in heaven without our bodies. So we always sort of come up with some stories about that. But I mean, imagine somebody watching, some pretty mature stuff on the internet every night and then going to heaven. It's like, okay, when you were human, you were indulging in a bunch of fantasies about things that there's no materials up here to do what you did. And so the thing that you loved the most when you were down there doesn't even exist up here by man's primitive definition of a heaven. I think it's safe to say that if there is a heaven of any kind, some central place to be, your lusts for the world are going to change drastically. But then what if you got bored? In the traditional definition, because you're just going to another matrix, another flavor of reality. What if there's one over that you can't even conceive of, because you have to live in that one that's above the one that we're in to loosen up your paradigm of being human? I mean, imagine you turn into this with the people who take the dream molecule. You know, the DMT people, they say they see spirits floating in the universe and they're just colors. And everything's great. And they always seem to kind of come in groups. Except there is some weird alien that seems to greet people on the other side. People believe in angels. And they believe in demons. A different type of life force that is either going to perpetually do good things, or those who are responsible for bringing us the negative such that perhaps we can appreciate the positive. And that's a wild thing to ingest, as we've said on a couple shows. You have to have bad to recognize good. So if you go to heaven and you're in a 100% good stage, everything's good, well, eventually it'll probably wear off. And then you'll have no orientation for bad or good. Unless for whatever reason, you're going to remember the bad from your previous dimension of existence. Now, scientists will talk about dimensions a lot, and I've criticized this a little bit, but, what they are doing is coming up with a new mathematical explanation of where you could exist in the model of the universe. The most basic 4 dimensions that we understand is X, Y, Z, the three-dimensional coordinate system in space, and then T on top of that, which is what time are you in that reality. And then you can keep going and going and going. You then create instances of the XYZT. And so you're in a different one. And then that's for the sake of frequency in the quantum model of everything. Well, there's infinite ones stacked up. Because number systems go infinitely small and infinitely big. You shouldn't be able to touch your fingers together, eventually, because you could always zoom in and push it together, zoom in, is that paradox. So at some point, when you start to existentially really look at the matrix, especially what I would call the deep matrix, and probably one of the best ways to visualize a deep matrix is to look at these mathematical models that they come up with for a 30-dimension reality, or even higher. As time goes on, they find more and more dimensions, right? And with T, it just becomes more insane, But I think that most of us are concerned about the physical before we're worried about the time relevant coordinate of where we are, right? I don't want to, I don't want to live in a body in a universe where I am constantly birthed into the universe and all I do is catch on fire and I vaporize and I feel that pain and then I come back in. I'm just looped in some fire and brimstone reality. Maybe it's not even a penal system. It's not related to being a bad person or a bad soul. It's just a place. It exists. Why does it exist? Because it can exist. And if it can't exist, it will exist. Because all things that can't exist do exist. Boy, say that 50 times fast. The coolest thing about our reality, in my opinion, when you start to get to that level of almost a frustration dream where you can conceive of these variables that I'm talking about, and you can quickly, just like when you have anxiety trying to conceive of an infinite number system, you start to conceive of these realities and it immediately, exponentially explodes in your mind. You're like, ooh, I don't have enough synapses in my brain to hold all those realities in a physical model in my mind. But here's what's interesting. Well, there's 2 things I would say, but one of the interesting and clever pieces of evidence of our reality, in my opinion, is something called design. Now, I've said it on probably a dozen shows, and it's something I think that you and I both need to remember this and say it to ourselves. Life is beautiful, meaning quite literally, all things on this planet that are alive are beautiful. Now, some folks might look at rocks and we think they're beautiful, especially precious stones and that sort of thing. But let's pull back and look at a leaf on any plant anywhere in the world. Look at the amazing fractal digression in its algorithm as a leaf veins spread out to the edge of the leaf. They start to vanish. The Fibonacci pattern in a lot of its construction. There is beauty in life. Every fish, every bird, every animal, it has its beautiful, amazing nature to it. Even these fish that are the ones you're not supposed to step on, look like they're kind of made of mud or whatever. If you pull it out of the water and look at it, it is, instead of thinking of it having to be some sort of smooth Ferrari or something like that, like these crazy, beautiful, dragonflies and mantis, all these wild species of mantis that are out there. That fish that is known as like the ugliest fish or whatever, because they have, if you take them and try to make them anthropomorphize them into human form, we would not date a chick that looks like half the fish out there. But if you just stop and go, wow, someone was tinkering with every single configuration that can survive as life. You can't make probably a fish without a heart or a human without a heart. So that's why we always have hearts of some form and fashion. We have something pumping, an ecosystem through our system, the ether through our bodies so that we can renew. A rock is not considered alive because it is pretty much a stationary object. Oh, it erodes and it probably goes through various phases over time, oxidizing and what have you. But everything that's alive is beautiful. How many times have you seen a landscape of Earth? So you don't consider the rock alive, but you look at Earth from a high altitude photograph and you're just, wow. Look at the Swiss Alps. Look at the forests of Germany. Look at Hawaii. All these different locations. A beautiful desert. A desert with huge sand dunes, and the one that just has crackled soil down beneath. When you see the crackled soil in those movies or Tom Petty videos, isn't it kind of cool? Isn't it tactile? Don't you just want to touch it? Haven't you been there as a kid when some mud dried up and all you want to do is reach down and kind of peel the top layer off and hold it in your hand? It's just wild. Design shows for me intent. Every insect is just fascinating if you really get into it. If we don't like a particular insect or animal, like we look at it and we feel a weird feeling, it's probably due to, remnants of instinctual programming that says that's dangerous, right? I'm probably never going to easily look at a 1 foot diameter spider from the rainforest and think, oh, wow, should like to have that on my face. It's not going to happen. So we have these indicators. But aside from that, if you're in a safe laboratory and these things aren't around you, you're just looking at photographs and you think it through, it's phenomenal. It looks like intent to me. When I get to this conversation, I always reference my old episode. I think it's in season 1 called The Answer. And it's right next to another episode called The Origin of Man. And the answer really suggests in its conclusion that we just need to live the life that we're living. So maybe that's the answer. Sometimes I will contemplate, especially for writing purposes, this notion of losing yourself in a void. A real physical void. Imagine getting in a spaceship and, like some of these little gray aliens that are so ballsy to fly around the universe and if they exist. And you hop in a ship and you fly so fast in a particular direction. You are way over warp 1, And you're watching the stars fly by you. You see that stuff in Star Trek all the time. And the warp factor they'd have to be going to make stars go flicking by them is hilarious, right? Let's say you're at warp 1,000,000 and gaining speed, and everything's going by. And eventually, if the fabric of the universe still exists beyond a barrier, because it could just be out there, and then there's nothing else, and you just go woof right out there, and you cease to exist. Your ship ceases to exist. It just sort of splatters on the wall, basically. But imagine you didn't. And now you're in this void, and there's nothing. What are the first emotions you might have as you turn around, look out the back window, in your little front display of your Star Trek spaceship, or maybe even a little pod, even more terrifying. It's just you and some weird coffin thing. So you're totally isolated, and you see the whole universe vanish. And there's nothing around. Nothing. The amount of horrific isolation I think that you would feel in a split second if you didn't think, if you had no control over your ship, you couldn't just turn it around. And hell, even if you could, that universe that you were in is so teeny tiny now, your ability to find it, even if you could turn around, you would need some guidance system in a void to get you back. You'd need a breadcrumb of some sort to get back to your home planet, to kiss your loved ones once again. And the second you drop into that void, oh man, the very essence of your purpose surfaces ferociously. You're supposed to be with people. You're not supposed to be alone. You're not supposed to be in a void. All that you love in the world is gone forever. Forever. And what if you couldn't die? What if your ship just kept you alive and there's no way you can turn off the program? And now you just sit and you stare. And you sit and you stare. And it's nothing forever. You would try to work within your pod to create another dimension of reality, to survive the insanity of being in this thing. And you would probably go through millennia of being totally insane inside this pod. Can you imagine? So at one point, you'd probably stop using your eyeballs to see. What's the point? You've seen the inside of this ship a million different ways. The smaller it is, the faster this is going to occur. I mean, if you had a big Star Trek spaceship, even if you were by yourself, at least you could mess around in the holodeck or 10 forward or whatever, sleep in every single bed in every single place. Eventually, you would still go nuts. But sitting inside this pod, again, if the ship can keep you alive, and for whatever reason, you just can't die, you don't age at all, you're going to start doing what we do in this world when we have deprivation situations. You will start to manifest your own reality in your body. You will most likely evolve in that ship to the point where, especially if you didn't die, but you could still kind of grow. Your brain would start creating a reality. You might start talking to yourself for a while. Then you wouldn't have to, because in your mind, you might be living in a constant dream state out of sheer necessity. So maybe your eyes are open, maybe they're not. You don't see anything anymore like you used to. You're seeing what's inside your mind's eye. And this is absurdly assuming that you have the capability of doing this in a void of all nothing, right? A true vacuum. I think as soon as you're in a true vacuum, you don't exist anymore. But let's just keep it going. But now, when we dream, I have a whole episode on dream people. Do those beings exist? I mean, they're not like normal human beings, but boy, some dreams I have are so unbelievably realistic that, geez, I have recently had a dream in the last week where I fell in love with a girl in my dream. It seemed like it lasted 2 or 3 hours. And the funny thing is there's nothing going on in the dream that you would do in real life. Like, I never sit down with a girl in my dream and go, so where are you from? Just that never happens. I just know her. She knows me. And a lot of times these women in these dreams are introduced into my life. They just walk in the room and it's love at first sight. And then we just sort of spend time together. We go do things together. We work with other people. They're aware that we're an item. And it just happened within a split second. But if you really want to split hairs, my dream is definitely a dimensional world. I mean, it's in color. There's sound. There's people. The world that I live in now, the architecture. It's, I don't really ever dream of my own house or anything. I dream sort of a city life most of the time. But it's real when I'm in the dream. If it weren't real, then it wouldn't be a dream. It wouldn't be happening. How many times have you woke up from a really good dream and you can tell your loved one about it in the most explicit detail? And as you are waking up and losing your connection with that dimension, all the details that you knew start to just fizzle away. And even if you get a lot of it written down on paper or out of your mouth, it is literally only being remembered from that point forward because you spoke it or wrote it. It's like you took it out of this dimension of which you can't bring into this world. But you did through words, and you painted it into this reality. I remember being in my late teens, and I had a dream where I had grabbed something. And it was in the dream, and I remember feeling like I had to wake up. Like someone was calling me in the real world, and I was like, I gotta go. And I'm telling these dream people. And I remember grabbing something in the room. It was in my right hand, and I was lying down, of course. And I remember waking up and feeling like this damn thing was in my hand. And I was like, oh my God, I pulled something from my dream into the real world. And for probably 1 or 2 seconds of my sleep paralysis, where I'm paralyzed, because we all have that, I could feel it in my hand. And then, poof, the paralysis goes away. I'm now fully conscious, or getting there very quickly. And I remember squeezing my hand, it wasn't there, and my heart broke. I was like, oh my God, I almost got it. I almost pulled something from my dream reality into this reality. There's the old Russian doll thingy. A person inside a person inside a person. And what's interesting about that whole thing is a dream is sort of like a Russian doll, isn't it? It's only too deep. I mean, like, you have your outside body that's dreaming. It's the outer shell. But if you pull that half off, the one inside that looks just like you is inside the dream. Russian doll is sort of like a dimensional metaphor. Freud talked about us having deeper and deeper levels of consciousness. Whether we truly have a subconscious, I don't know. It seems as if we simply have a processor that continues to process things that aren't in our short-term memory. It's back there thinking about why humans like tea. Boiled leaves in water. My hope is that perhaps contemplating these things that are so abstract but yet real, such as reality, right? Reality, is that we can somehow come up with a way of living that gives us peace, but still be inquisitive. It's almost as if, well, again, part of it has to do with the finale of Altered States, the movie. trying to find the inception point of life. And here's a spoiler alert at 50 some odd minutes. Because during the forgotten sci-fi movies, I didn't spoil it for you, but here we got to bring it out. And I've brought it out in previous episodes as well. But he found that void. He found that nothingness at the beginning of time. And he said it was terrifying. It was terrifying in that it was nothing. And that fictional character in that movie, if he had existed and gone through that phase, you were talking about a person that would never ask the existential question ever again because he, for one, got the answer. How many people have had a near-death experience, not a life-after-death experience, but a near-death experience, and they realized how much of their life they weren't living, and they completely changed their daily appreciation for everything, their daily life. And then you see it and you're like, God, I don't want to have a near-death experience ever. But boy, I certainly would like to get that mojo that dude or that chick has, having gone through that. I would be interested in your objectives, and if you're a Matrix person, what, if any, solace you find in that theory? Do you feel more comfortable being electrons in some memory grid somewhere in some higher up computer? Do you want to be a program in Tron? Does that solve any problems for you? I'm not saying it does. I'm just curious if you feel more comfortable with that. But then where is the computer? Who programmed it? And who made them? And who made them? And who made them, right? It's a hell of a thing to wake up to this dimensional reality question, isn't it? Because I didn't always think this way. I was so content as a child to think, I'm down here on earth, God's up there. Don't know about this Jesus character, but I don't need that to feel complete in my model of the universe. I need to be good and virtuous down here. I need to tell the truth. Don't step on anyone to get ahead, sort of thing. Want to travel through the eye of the needle with ease. That's it. I die. I go to heaven. As a child, my vision of heaven was, in fact, I used to pray to God every once in a while as a child, and I'd say, God, because something would have happened, or some vision of what I wanted to do with life would befall me, and I would immediately say to God, okay, God, when I get up there, I want you to remember that I want to do this. Hell, half the time it would be me watching I remember one, it was a woman, I think it was like a soda commercial or a beer commercial. It was a woman on some like little tiny sailboat. And I think she was like literally hanging on the mast. It was really tiny. It was like maybe 10 feet wide. It was almost like a windsurfing before they put it on the surfboards or whatever it was. But she was really beautiful. And I remember I said, God, I want to kiss that girl. I want to, be with that girl. I didn't really have super sexual thoughts at the time, but I said, I want to be with that girl. Bizarre. That's how primitive my definition was. It was heaven was a me world. No sense of, I was an only child too, but so there was no sense of communing in heaven. All my grandparents were alive. All my aunts and uncles were alive. Parents are alive, And so I never thought of anything else until I started losing my grandparents, and then it was like, wow. Or I started finding out my heroes are gone. I discovered Rod Serling passed away, I believe, in, I think it was 1975. He was 50 years old. And, when I didn't know who he was when I was a child. And it's really strange. I've always had this weird thing with, it's sort of a weird comfort thing that I'm pretty sure it was 75, 70 or 75. I think it was 75. But that he was alive and I was alive at the same time on planet Earth. That sort of warms my heart. With classical musicians, they're all dead, before you're born. So you just kind of go, yeah, Leonardo was not alive ever during my lifetime. But now it's, it's sort of I think it's fairly common to romanticize heaven to address loss. I want to see my grandmother again, maybe. I want to be young again. I want to live the 70s and 80s again. Certain parts of it. Parts of my childhood. But maybe you never do. Even if you go, God says, well, that was the past. The only thing you can do is go back down and become a human being again. But that's to suggest time is real and that time is a limiter. But don't you want heaven to be a bit like the Matrix? As soon as I get there, I want to be able to do stuff that I never could do or do it again, which is just in itself is a magical trick. I want to be 9 years old and drive my motorcycle again, or 8 years old with my motorcycle. I want to roam the country fields of my Kansas hometown in 78. For sure. I want to go see Star Wars for the first time again. Maybe I'll go as an adult. Same theater, maybe watch myself across the room. Look at that shit, man. See it for the first time. See it 100 times. Watch it all over the world with different audiences and see how they reacted to it. I want to direct every script I've ever written. I want to make it organically with my own flaws and mistakes, and then I want to make it so many freaking times that it's perfect. Just see how perfect I can get the story. Anything. We want the heaven to be a matrix. And the funny thing is that we always, I'm just speaking for myself, but I'm saying we, because I think I'm not alone in this situation, but imagine the situation where we feel like we must be in physical body form to exist and to enjoy those things from the past one more time when we're in heaven. Let's just say it exists. But all that really needs to happen is the organized energy that is your soul, perhaps, if it can manifest any visual aspect. And the DMT people seem to have proven that. Gurus that float into the universe and have out-of-body experiences attached by a silver cord, they seem to have that proof that there's some sort of physical self-realization after death. We want to be physical, but maybe all that needs to happen is, however this stuff is controlled, whether it be God, he's like, I got your old program. He blows the dust off of it. And he's like, sit over there. Park your soul over there. You're like, ooh, this floating energy, and just sit on this pedestal. And God just reaches up his metaphorical hands and puts himself around you, and he just injects in you the vision, like a brainstorm machine. He injects his vision in you where you feel that you have your body. And you have this rich, unbelievably real experience. And I mean every minute detail, from a rock in your shoe to something in your eye to how you feel after you ate or whatever. It's all tactile and perfect. And then he pulls his hands away, his metaphorical hands, and you sit there and go, but God, that was so real. And then you might ask the question, did I ever really exist like that? Or were you just putting your hands on me and making me feel like I existed? Is there even a planet Earth at all? And God just goes, not really. It exists for you, didn't it? Didn't that feel cool? You're like, yeah, totally. I loved it. Well, then it's real. Now, what's funny about this Matrix thing is that we have we have a fictional version of it in Star Trek called the holodeck. It's hard light, right? You go in there and you have these experiences. Now, there's been all these episodes where the safeguards go haywire and people actually get hurt. People have even died in there, I'm pretty sure. And so to them, it's real. It's a machine that's creating it, and they can completely conceive of it, so it's real. And then today, in our infantile state of computer programming and simulation, we have these horrible headsets we put on, and, it's very effective. Even if it's pretty low res, it takes over your brain. Even though if you just focus for a split second, you can see the pixels that you're staring at. I haven't put the 4K ones on. I don't know anyone who has a 4K headset, but I know they make them. It's going to have to be like 4 million K before your brain won't see pixels, but whatever. We create those and we experience them. And there's no problem conceiving how it works. Even the holodeck, we can conceive of it. But somehow, this world remains a giant mystery. We exist here, don't we? Regardless of what it is. We have this thing, that I can't seem to shake, the notion that the Mandela effect, in its larger, more obtuse examples that seem to be very evident that something might be different. I mean, there's a lot of people that just say, look, you're just all remembering things wrong. Could be. I've got my own list of things that seem pretty opposite to me. But it seems like reality is pretty organic, right? I have the episode on consensus reality, where that is the case. We are all homogenizing our impression of reality. And if there's any sort of organic element to the program, it would suggest that the program isn't as disciplined as we might think it wasn't, when we were born and told what it is, right? But if we have 8 billion people in the world, and 1 billion people remember it one way, and 500 million remember it that way, and et cetera down the line, then you might have enough consciousness power to make the continent of the United States remember Berenstain, while there's a big chunk in Europe that remembers Berenstain. I mean, they remember saying it in school. Librarians here in the United States remember Berenstain, and they were handing out those books for 35, 40 years to kids. Don't you think somebody would be looking down and going, oh, why is it's Berenstain, not Berenstain? Look, right here. Look at the word. Oh, yeah, I totally got it wrong. No one did that in the United States of America? I forgot what the painting was, but there's the passage in the Bible that talks about something about laying down with the lamb or something like that, and all the paintings in the churches are now, they have that passage on the painting, but it's a lion instead of a lamb. Seems kind of weird, man. Passage about a lamb that has a lion, something like that. It's nuts, right? Talk about a glitch in the system, man. There's a part of me that still believes in consensus reality, and it's sort of a bummer when you think about, well, I should say this much, when you wake up to the corruption of the universe, corruption of this planet, you're thinking, man, I don't want anyone to think about this stuff. But if the billions of dollars that are put into public perception truly do convince people to believe a particular way, then maybe whatever they want you to believe starts to become a reality, but it takes hundreds of years and, it pounds it into you. The Inquisitions in Europe that pounded Christianity into the citizens who said, we don't want to believe this. We were here the whole time when you said this. These miracles were occurring. We didn't see any miracles. If that had happened, we would have known about it. We all would have flocked to Rome to be healed or whatever. This never happened. Pound, But now there's no more Inquisitions. And now, through the internet especially, critical thinking is coming back with a vengeance. And now, honestly, without getting too on a point, we have people that seem to believe a weird version of the world, and they're young. And when you know, either because you lived the reality that they're denying, or you've got enough empirical evidence to prove to yourself that what was claimed to be true is no longer true, regardless of how emotional people get about a particular story, and people still believe it, then, if we figured this out in a college, then we could do some calculations, probably, as idiotic as that might sound, to figure out, okay, it's going to take about a millennia of contrary belief in this consensus reality to finally flush out those lies and get rid of them. The deep matrix. The real takeaway definition of the deep matrix would be, how deep does it go? How many layers are there? How many dimensions of any reality exist? It would almost seem that inherently all realities are made of infinite dimensions. Because if I'll give it to you in a real simple manner. If at any point in time, the elements of your reality can be measured in dimensions, measured by numbers, quantified by numbers, then you live in an infinite dimension of reality. You can change realities. I don't know. Is there an infinite number of books that can be written? Before the monkeys write Shakespeare? Maybe. Not sure. 26 letters in the alphabet? But because a book can go on forever and ever and ever and ever? I don't know. Does it turn into gobbledygook? Some UU encoded URL? I don't know. Don't know. Seems like it could. Summertime is a good time to let your mind open and relax, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. I apologize to my Australian listeners, New Zealand listeners, and South Hemisphere listeners. You're getting in the colder realm of your world. What I like about summer is that we get out in the sun. And believing in ether, it would be naive to not consider for a second that the more you're exposed to sunlight, that rich, deep summer sunlight, which for some reason feels different than winter sunlight, doesn't it? Like if it's 95 degrees, which happens every once in a while in December in California, and I go outside in this backyard and I'm sweating, making a show, it feels different. There's something weird about the season being able to heat me up that much. But it seems that, let's just say this, okay. In this dimension of reality, which I believe is, again, heavily ether-based, I'm sorry for mentioning that several times. Do not drink alcohol every time I say ether, because I will turn you into an alcoholic. But imagine the amount of information that you're getting from the entire universe the moment that you get hit by full frontal winds of ether / photons, photonic waves. And let's just think about it. Way out in the universe, perhaps, there's life out there. Who knows what it is? But it's intelligent. Could be some amoebic, multicelled amoebic creature in some planet sitting in some pool of water having a pretty cool thought. But it's got a pretty good sun, a very powerful sun. So the sun is jamming its ethereal waves through that being, capturing the information like a little TCP/IP packet hijack. It goes into the bow of that sun, and then it runs out the other side of the sun, and it travels way across the universe. Maybe it just hopscotches from one sun to another sun to another sun. And then eventually you're sitting in your pool, chilling out, thinking. And because you've relaxed your mind, all the chaos of the universe disappears. And here comes that little packet of information. The epiphany from a tiny little creature in another planet goes straight into your head. And perhaps because that creature does not exist in what you would perceive to be reality, you're having this thought that no one has ever had on planet Earth before. I believe that all the plants in my backyard are very much alive. Very much alive. I think they have consciousness and they think. I don't know what they're thinking about. I would assume it's a pretty peaceful thing, because aside from a weed whacker or someone trying to trim them, there's no predator for a plant. It just does what it does. I have a gigantic tree here. I don't even know what it is. Puts out these little tiny red berries. But it's huge. I have 2 of them. I don't know what they're thinking. That tree must be at least 40 or 50 years old, at least. And because every plant in the world, in this world that we live in, is just a leaf or a branch from its father or its mother, however you want to say it. Its unisex predecessor. The palm tree I'm staring at, I got 2 or 3, a whole bunch in the corner over here. That palm tree is the palm tree. They're all cousins. They're all brothers and sisters. Way back to the original design / mutation / however it got here in the first place. That's a lot of thinking. That is a lot of thinking. All these plants have seen all history of all mankind since the very beginning. If there ever were dinosaurs, they saw it all. It's in their bloodline. Douglas Adams came up with the total perspective vortex. For those of you who don't know who that is, he wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the beautiful sci-fi comedy. And one of the jokes he put in his book, which I've mentioned a couple times in 400 some odd episodes, was one of the punishments in the universe was to be put in the total perspective vortex, and it was to give you the infinite perspective of how insignificant you are in the universe. The infinitely small dot on an infinitely small dot. Infinitely small. Doesn't mean insignificant. Just means small. Compared to all the other mass in the universe. And energy. And spirit, perhaps. Man doesn't like to feel insignificant. I don't think we are. I think it's a moot argument to contemplate. But that passage had a huge effect on me. In fact, I heard it in the radio broadcast first. There's the old video they call The Power of 10. It starts off with a woman, I think, lying down. Actually starts at the subatomic level, then it zooms all the way out, and it's every 10 seconds it gets the power of 10. It keeps going back, so everything's magnified down 1/10 every 10 seconds, and then you have to accelerate to keep that algorithm going. I've never been able to shake that. It pulls all the way out of the universe in this, pseudo definition of the shape of the universe, whatever. And then it pushes all the way back in and goes back into the girl's hand. Something very therapeutic about that, especially if you want to come up with different models of the universe. If it's the same above as it is below. And this used to be a funny joke they used to tell in the 70s when people really start getting into weed. That, the speck of dirt in your fingernail could contain an entire universe. And so no matter where you go, it's like a fractal. Way up above, there's a plant somewhere, and we're maybe in the stem of it, And above that, it just keeps doing it and keeps doing it. It's all a big giant loop. And then at that point, you don't need to contemplate anything but the reality that you're in. The instance of reality that you're in. The only science fiction thing I'll say in closing here about a matrix for me that is the romantic version of this whole argument would be we want to have time bandit doors. We want to somehow walk out of this reality and have more to do than just what is on the plate today. Because there's a point where you can conceive of everything you can do as a human being, and then you start to contemplate, you pick out the ones you love, and then you dive in and you push hard, and then you run up against all the obstacles that particular endeavor has. And regardless of whether or not you're ever going to get them done, you start to really just see life as a very small, short journey. And you could change realities, but unless it's some dream reality, which is very euphoric, almost where what you care about in your dreams is usually much different than what you care about in reality. This one anyway, when you wake up. It seems like there's less concern sometimes, unless you go to bed and have a frustration dream or some nightmare of some kind. I had an interesting story told to me within the last month, and it's about a person I know who's dealing with a loved one who is getting older, and they're starting to lose their physical ability in the world because their bodies start to break down. They're still pretty healthy, still going well, but one of the surprising byproducts of this, because I was talking to him, I was like, how's everything going, And he said, well, their loved one is starting to have nightmares at night. And I said, really? Nightmares? It's really weird. And this person that I know of who's having these nightmares is not the kind of person I would imagine having them. I mean, there's nothing horrific going on in their life, just getting older. I said, well, what is it? And essentially, what I got from the comments, I can't remember exactly what the person said, but it was metaphorically attached to the fact that in age, they were losing the capability of just getting up and walking across the room, of having, the energy that we have when we're young. And so in the dreams, the nightmare is that limitation started to manifest in ways that were scary. I can't walk anymore, but I want to walk. I know how to walk. I've been walking my whole life. Can't do it. And something else and something else and something else. And I thought, wow, I've lived nearly 50 years in this world, and I have never heard of anyone having that problem of having nightmares. And I think it's interesting that it probably is something that is occurring more frequent than I know, but it never heard it in documentary, never heard a friend say it. And so I think about my own, mortality. And, just think about it. In 30 years, I'll be 80 years old. Jeez. 30 years old. I remember where I was and what I was doing with my life. It doesn't seem like yesterday, but it doesn't feel like 30 years, man. And it comes out of that age-old question. We're talking about swapping realities for a split second. Let's go for that during the close here. How terrifying is death if you believe that you're just going to another dimension of reality? My mind is sharp today, but will it not be as sharp 30 years from now, such that my grasp of what I'm doing is, not as lucid? I assume it will be. My family lives a long time. I mean, I have a pretty good chance of living another 50 years with my genetics. But still, what I wake up and concern myself with will change over time, most likely diminish. There's a point in my life where I will not be able to physically work anymore. I could still run my mouth, thank God. But what if my brain can't do what it does to deep thoughts? One of my loves about having created this show, which was a total mistake, is that I'll have these archives for my family. I had to read about my relatives, some of the really famous ones. One of them is Bullet Hole Ellis. Go look him up. He's my great-great-grandfather. Maybe he's 3 greats. I'm not sure. I think he might be 3 greats. And then my great-great-grandfather, Lewis Allen John. He was a Civil War vet, 2-time Civil War vet. Lived to be 101. Lived a pretty wild life. He was an inventor. He did something based on the some patent he got based on the hay combine or something. I don't know. Something with agriculture. Pretty interesting. But my kids, if we don't have a giant reset in this universe, which we might very well have, my kids will be, hey, you want to know your great-grandfather was? Here's like 400 episodes, 500 episodes of this guy yammering around in his backyard. I'm assuming this will be contraband in the future, right? How dare someone think for themselves? It's interesting. So anyway, I hope you've got a little value out of this. Again, I'm making these summer episodes extremely, extremely fringy, just to give them a little bit of sauce, a little spice, and to sort of put something out there. Because I still, I create these shows half the time because I have to. My brain just has to exercise the subject matter for at least an hour. So I hope you're enjoying it as well. Viewership is probably about 1/3 of what it was when the show was really booming. So that's not too bad. The website is really helping people find episodes. So, it's a WordPress website, but now we have the search field on there. You go to deepthoughtsradio.com. Everything's up there. Search field. There's a category list on the front page. Again, if you're on mobile, you got to scroll past the first 10 videos that are in thumbnail form. But again, if you like a particular topic, get in there and listen to them. I can see people going through every video in a particular category, so it's really cool. Some people are watching all the dream episodes. Some people are watching all the alien episodes, the moon episodes. Again, I did just move 430 episodes into some of these categories, and some of them have been in the database for a really long time. So if you see anything that's wrong, let me know. Just know that the website has all the links to the video, the audio. It has a link to the brand new season 1. And it has the couple ways you can support the show, which is Patreon, which is what everyone's using to support the show. Again, I left PayPal up there, but no one's using it. But yeah, if you're out there supporting us, that'd be great. Obviously, passing the show around to your friends and family, just want to be a little careful. Make sure you pick something that they like. Preface the show with, this guy's a little edgy. This guy's sort of a foul mouth sometimes, but the content is whatever you think it is. Still contemplating season 5. And you should know that I think about seasons pretty much until about the week before I shoot the intro. And then once I shoot the intro, it takes form. And then boom, we're off to the races. So hopefully I can come up with a good list of stuff. Getting a lot of good suggestions from you folks. Just know I'm throwing it into multiple repositories on my end. Again, if you want to really get an episode done on something very specific and it's a giant rabbit hole, please act like a producer of mine and give me some bullets. Give me like 5 to 10 bullets of why you think this subject's awesome. Pretend like you work for me and we're on a show together, right? You're in the studio with me and I just come to work and you're like, hey, you're not ready for this today, but by next week, you probably should spend your off time viewing these 2 videos, and here's what you're going to get. And I've even given you hot links to various minutes in the video that are really the crux of it. And if you're expanding on something I've already done, that might also help too. I've got a few of you that chat me regularly in the Facebook chat. Just go to the Locked Facebook group, which is also in the link. We have a Twitter page as well. And I don't always have time to respond because I think that if you take the time out to write me something intelligent, then you deserve an intelligent response. So I will view you. A lot of you folks, if you know me, you already know this and you know the game. You'll post it to me. And some of you are just giving me some great stories about your life, and I love it. But it might take 2 weeks to a month to get back to you, but when I respond to you, it's typically fairly in-depth. Some of you just small talk me, and I small talk back, and it's always very valuable, so I appreciate all you guys. Again, I want to say, if you haven't been, I don't like Facebook myself, okay, and once we get a replacement, we'll all move over there, but right now, it does what it does, but the group is locked. And so any comments you make in the Facebook group, unless your boss were to get into the group, they're not going to see anything you do. You can't even share anything out of the group because it's locked. So it's our own private little place. We have some of the best folks on planet Earth. I'm just telling you, I say this in all the episodes, but I have not been a liar yet. We disagree. I'll post something up there and someone's like, I think this person's a total jerk and da-da-da. And I'm like, okay, hey. Right now I don't seem to believe that, but maybe you'll change my mind. But even if you don't, I don't care. I mean, if you don't change my mind or I don't change yours, it's not what the purpose of the group is for. Lots of good fun stuff. We have some great moderators that really pay attention to the page all day long. Like, we're always sharing the experience of approving posts from folks because everything's approved. So, there's a handful of posts that don't get approved, but not much. And there's only a handful of people that have ever been banned from the Facebook page. They're not banned, but they just don't get to comment. That's super duper rare. Haven't had one of those in a long time. So anyhow, if you've been watching Deep Thoughts for a really long time, appreciate you for hanging on. If you just joined the site or joined the movement, welcome. Let's get the word out to everybody. Let's have some fun because we need more minds in this game. But until the next video, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.